Hi there, and welcome to episode 158 of Becoming More Me. I'm your host, Teresa Lear-Levine, and this show is designed for busy-minded entrepreneurs who are looking to increase the calm, clarity, and confidence in their personal lives and their businesses so that they can achieve next-level success and breakthroughs without all the unnecessary fear, overwhelm, and anxiety. So this week is a continuation that builds upon last week's episode where I began to share about the spiritual journey that I took when I attended a business retreat. I say that with air quotes because it was deeply spiritual in Chilliwack, British Columbia, up in Canada, and realized very quickly that this was not a one-part podcast, but likely a 3 or 4-part podcast. So this week is part 2. We're going to begin exploring what happened on the first full day or two of the retreat, including some of the speakers that we got to experience, like Mark Groves, the founder of Create the Love, as well as great masterminding. I'm going to introduce you to the concept of mastermind. I'm going to share some of the things I brought to the table that I was looking to cultivate or receive during the weekend, as well as the different blocks that came up for me as we entered different sessions. I'm really hoping to convey in this episode how transformative things can be when we seek out experiences like this, and also the process of preparing for experiences like this and integrating them after the fact. Because as I sit here a month after the experience, I'm still growing from it. So all of that is going to be shared today and so much more in this second part of this series, recapping the retreat that I went to in May of 2024. It all starts now. Hey, so when we left off on the last episode, I had already talked about the traveling to the retreat. I had talked about what happened during the first basically 24 hours that I was there, not even actually, and just covered a lot of different things, from what it feels like to travel as an entrepreneurial mom, the mom's guilt of being gone over Mother's Day weekend, and the beautiful things that were starting to unfold just as the retreat began. So today I want to go a little bit deeper into the happenings of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and even more than that, and we'll see where things get to, the happenings after the retreat. So I will say, and perhaps these episodes are helpful for people who are planning retreats or attending them, I'm sure for both, but this container was put together very consciously. There was a request made specifically from our hosts to make sure that we were not overburdened leading up to the retreat, and also to make sure that we left time for processing after the retreat. And that was something I had to plan for, because it's already a lot just to, figure things out so that you can be away from your family for essentially 5 days and get everything done that you need to get done before then so that you don't feel crazy when you get back. And then, of course, there's always catch up and things that you don't expect when you come back from something like that. So to then additionally make sure that I was taking really good care of myself leading up to it. Like I went for a massage and I made sure all my personal care was taken care of. I was doing extra meditating. I closed off a lot of appointments on my calendar so that for 2 days before I left, I did no appointments. I just had time to prepare, relax, pack, be with my family, and that sort of thing. And yeah, it was conscious as far as really slowing down. And then I did the same thing on the other end of the retreat, knowing that I was going to just have a lot of mental, physical, emotional, spiritual processing to do, which was even more than I imagined and anticipated. So I kept a very, very light schedule the entire week after the retreat so that I had time for that. And it was necessary. There was a lot of napping afterwards. There were days after the retreat when I would get up at my normal time in the 4 a.m. hour and find myself needing to lay down to take some like non-sleep deep rest or a nap or something by 9 or 10 in the morning. Just a lot processing on a lot of different levels. So let me kind of dive back in to how we spent the day on Friday, and we'll take things from there. So I already mentioned how I had started that day off with a beautiful walk, and we started the day also after that with an amazing breakfast that Michaela, our chef for the weekend, made for us, and some intentional stretching, breath work, body movement. Our neighbors must have thought we were crazy. There were days that we were kind of out there like just making fun sounds, howling like wolves, all that kind of stuff. And it was fabulous. So started the day off very intentionally. And we got right into masterminding. Now, I don't remember exactly which session it was. It might have been Thursday when we came together, or it might have been Friday morning. But we all shared kind of what we hoped to get out of the weekend and our main reason for being there. And for me, I remember saying something along the lines that I just really wanted to receive. And not in like a selfish way, like give me all the things, but I wanted to receive the love, the companionship, the wisdom of others, the understanding of others. And I also wanted to be able to give that of myself too, and just really have a beautiful exchange throughout the weekend with people who I'd never been with and spent time with. And, for all intents and purposes, it will never ever be like that again. So I just really wanted to be present and allow whatever was intended to unfold without putting a whole lot of spin or expectation on it. And the other thing that I was really looking for clarity on was, well, there was a couple of things. I was having a big feeling of there being this particular abundance block going on in my life and my business, and really wanting some clarity on that. And then looking for help masterminding the growth of my business, obviously. This is technically a business retreat, although it was a spiritual deep dive. And while all of that had business running throughout it, it was like no business retreat that I think anyone's ever been to. So I was looking for clarity there, and clarity on the way that my business is going to grow this year, like what I'm going to lean into, be it public speaking or, more paid speaking gigs, or how I'm going to run monthly workshops and that sort of thing. So really just developing a plan with fresh eyes to take through the rest of 2024. And I knew there was plenty of expert advice and amazing business owners there to weigh in on that. So I got a lot of clarity there. And a lot of the answers are still trickling in, but with having that openness and not expecting everything to happen within the container of the retreat weekend, there's been a lot that continues to happen even still a month after the retreat when I'm recording this. So the whole idea with a mastermind, which is technically what this weekend was, is that when all of the different minds and skill sets and everything else come together in this container, this new mind, the mastermind, is essentially created. And from there, we all receive so very much in such a different way than we ever could individually, or even as just, pairs or smaller groups than the mastermind itself. And I think a mastermind also puts us in a state of greater vulnerability, which is necessary because so many of us are conditioned to try to do things on our own and not ask for help. And when we try to do that, we also exclude the universe or God, or however you want to look at that, from being a helping hand when it's that, the we of it all instead of the me that can accomplish so much, and that we're not intended to do any of it alone. So yeah, and that's, a lot of us kind of brought up that whole thing of really trying to do things and push and strive and struggle on our own when it's really not necessary. And the power is so much greater when we come together. So it was a very powerful weekend because we were all able to lift each other up and shed light on things in new ways that we weren't individually doing. And there was a lot of, spirituality and deeper conversation around basic business principles that just made it all make so much more sense on a different level. And also a good number of people who were there have been studying A Course in Miracles for a while. I have personally been called back to that text recently and have been immersing myself in it pretty deeply since the retreat in my own way. I find the actual book to be very difficult for me to digest, but I love all the different lecture series that I have found on them, and listening to those is really helpful, more conversational, almost like a podcast style of learning. And I like meditations that bring A Course in Miracles in. That's kind of active and more of a way to follow through with the workbook that goes along with A Course in Miracles than just reading and doing the workbook. So I know how I best learn, and I know what has prevented me from diving into this course previously. And I think I've found some really beautiful ways over the last month to bring it into my life in a way that I'm absolutely loving. So for anybody who's not familiar with A Course in Miracles, you've heard me talk before about Abraham Hicks and these other kind of channeled works, and you may be familiar with things like the Seth books, but all of those are kind of channeled through people and written in a channeled way. So is A Course in Miracles. It's a channeled work that is just freaking amazing, that was channeled back in the 70s, and millions and millions of people have studied it since then. And it's brilliant. It's deeply spiritual. I guess it might, if you were trying to put it into a religion, it might lean a little bit towards Christianity, but it's not a religious text. It's these truths, these universal truths, and just really deep spiritual lessons and things that you can begin applying to your life, because, this world that we live in is so very different from, the universe, God's world. And, being able to figure out the things that are actually the truth versus the illusions that we are living in, and the ego mind that is running the show so often, is so beautiful in this new way. I have always loved anything that is spiritual, and I just find learning and applying it to your life can be such a game changer. So I'm already seeing so many shifts just having really made a commitment to daily study and practice since the beginning of May. And yeah, it feels really good. So there was a lot of that kind of thinking happening. And then, you're talking about business and then trying to figure out the energetics of things and everything else. It was just a lot of deep conversation. And, people were opening up a lot more come Friday. So as we were having these different brainstorming sessions and masterminding sessions, the vulnerable things would be coming up, and we would, kind of do different practical exercises. I brought up, since I was there to, as one of my big things to work on abundance blocks, I brought up some particular money beliefs, money blocks and things that I was still working on. I've worked on a lot over the years, but we always have those next level things, right? So I brought them up and brought them to the table and ended up kind of doing this deep visualization and, breaking out these, our laser guns, almost pretending that we have laser guns. And I was kind of shooting these limiting beliefs and transforming things. And it was very transformative, and it was all just kind of happening in the moment. A lot of things unraveled like that, where it was okay, cool, this just came up. Let's take care of it. And because we had so many different practitioners, doctors, therapists, all different kinds of training there, there were all sorts of unique approaches to how we could, you know, just really make a difference right there in the moment. And it was so much fun and really kept us all on our toes too, because you knew that if you were going to bring something to the table, it was going to get met with love and compassion and also ideas and real actionable steps that you could take in the moment. So I really appreciated that. And I'll tell you something else that's really interesting is that when we were all going around the circle about why we were there, what we wanted to kind of take away from the weekend, learn, do, etc., so many of the people that signed up to go had no idea even what the retreat was about, who would be there, or anything else. It was the energy of the gentlemen that were leading the retreat, Dan and Alexander, and they made a decision like that right off of it. And there was at least 6 or 8 people, so about a third of the attendees, that basically had that story of, I don't really know why I'm here, but I just knew I needed to come. Or I heard about it and I signed up in an instant. I just knew. And that's the kind of action that people take when your energy is aligned and people can really sense your integrity and like what you're bringing to the table. So I thought that was really beautiful. And then to be able to spend time with all of these people who maybe not all the time and they're working on it, but more than most people I interact with are trusting their gut, trusting energetics, trusting intuition, and seeing all of these beautiful things unfold was just, it was spectacular. And I think I'm having a lot of trouble conveying what happened this weekend because it is like emblazoned in my soul, but like there's no video, there's no thing that was created for social media or what have you. Yes, there was a photographer there for the weekend. I'm sure there's some little video clips and things, but I so often see like big time retreats and even smaller retreats where there's so much that has been captured on behalf of sharing with social media. And this retreat had a super private feel to it, which is also something I'm trying to maintain, though I'm sharing. I mean, just so much space to just drop into the truth of who we all are, which I think 100% of us had become disconnected from in some way. And I mean, let's face it, so many of us are disconnected from that. Even when we can connect to it, we become disconnected. The ego gets in the way and we forget the capital T truth of who we are. And there were so many reminders of that this weekend. You know, I have never looked into the eyes of people who I barely know for as long as I did that weekend and just, you know, cried together, literally and figuratively held each other, hugged each other, held hands, just felt such deep love for people who, you know, for the most part, I was just getting to know. Now, I will say, I think part of what made the experience more special and allowed me to have that safety from the get-go was knowing my mentors, Dan and Alexander, very well before going into it. No, we had never spent time, you know, in person with each other, but we've developed a pretty deep relationship and a lot of trust over a year and a half of working together. And I mean, we probably spend between our one-on-one coaching, group coaching, other things that happen, easily 3 hours a week together. So that relationship definitely helped. And, you know, it's interesting because sometimes you go to things or, you know, even just kind of like if you were getting to know somebody on a Zoom call or attending a summit or a retreat or something, and people might preface it by saying, this is a safe space and you can share anything and whatever. It didn't even need to be said. in this kind of an environment because of the caliber of people and the energetics of the people that were there. There was no need to set any kind of rules or etiquette or anything. It was just super safe space. And that became more and more important as the weekend went on, because whether it was intentionally planned this way or whether it just unfolded this way because of like the bonds and the willingness for us all to be vulnerable and share in more deep and intimate ways as time went on, it like things really started unfolding on like much deeper levels just as time passed, and the types of things that we were doing were going deeper. So yeah, it was really amazing. So after all of the delicious food and amazing masterminding, and also getting to hear Dan Harrison spent like about an hour probably just telling his stories, his vulnerable stories of where he comes from in all of this and how he has really overcome some really difficult challenges. We had talked about some of it when he was on my podcast earlier this year in February, but this was a lot deeper. And it was also, he's a really good storyteller. So I loved being able to just listen and to receive more of who he is and to understand that on a deeper level. We had lunch, we did some more masterminding throughout the afternoon, and then in the evening, that is when Mark Groves came to, spend time with us, and we learned so much from him in the time that he was there as well. So for anyone not familiar, Mark Groves is the founder of Create the Love, and he and his wife, Kylie McBeath, recently released their first book together called Liberated Love, Release Codependent Patterns and Create the Love You Desire. And it came out probably 2 weeks maybe before we were all together. So of course I grabbed the Audible book, which as always I recommend. And in this case, I definitely recommend it because Mark and Kylie do a lot of chatting between the chapters that you don't get if you're just reading the regular book or the Kindle. So I felt like I had a better understanding of the essence of things going into them. And yeah, he did not disappoint. And I didn't know what to expect from the time with him, but things went deep pretty quick. And we talked about codependency in our relationships. We talked about codependency in our work and our client outcomes. And, it probably is helpful to define codependency, but the way that Mark at least defined it when we were having this talk, and in his book also, is that it's a relational dynamic where we source security, safety, at the cost of ourselves, at the cost of our own needs and our own overall sense of well-being. And so that can happen not just in romantic relationships, marriages, and that sort of thing. It can happen in all different relationships, parents, children, clients, all of that. So really digging in and exploring that. And yeah, the way that it causes us to look at ourselves on a deeper level. And then through his book, talking about this like liberated love where, you can let go and see what happens and be truly liberated in the way that you love another without that codependency. And I think that's so beautiful. And it ended up coming back as a full circle moment after the retreat also, when one of the gentlemen was there. We had a call several weeks after the retreat to just see each other again on Zoom and kind of open the container briefly, share what has been happening, how we've all been processing everything and so forth. And one of the gentlemen talked about how a hummingbird had flown into his home and he had to get it out. And in order to do that, he'd never been that up close with a hummingbird. We're normally seeing them moving their wings a million miles a minute and fluttering all about and making quick movements. And he had to pick it up in his hands. And it was this reminder to just hold it loosely, hold something gently, and let it go without trying to hold it too tight or muffle the life in it or anything else. And then when he brought that up on the call a couple of weeks ago, I was in this state for almost 2 weeks after the retreat where I was just feeling so euphoric, so light, so held, so just at peace and joy, the way we all really should be, but should be the rule, not the exception, right? When we're actually really vibrating in the way and connecting with source in the way that we're intended to. And it made me feel so grateful for the way that my husband just kind of sent me off, held me loosely, allowed me to go into this experience for this long weekend, to postpone Mother's Day, to not have any guilt about it, and to just let me go spread my wings in a new and different way at this retreat and come back transformed. And yeah, I mean, when one person goes through something like that, the transformation happens to everyone. Kind of like how when one person meditates, the peace goes outside of them and affects others. And so my experience was not just mine. It was an experience that affected my husband, our marriage, the kids, the family, everything. And there were some moments when there was some backlash and some fallout afterwards where understanding was not completely there on both of our sides. But, and this is much like when I talk in my book about pleasure backlash happening last summer, it was an opportunity to open and go deeper. And I've probably said it a bunch of times, but I'll keep saying it for either those that need to hear it, those in the back, those that need it one more time, those that need it louder, or those who haven't heard it yet. This is one of the main reasons I do the work that I do. Because when we have the ability to regulate, expand, nourish, nurture our nervous system, when we are able to work with our subconscious and we are able to see things through different eyes, and that may even just be the prayer or the advice that we are seeking is just, how can I see things differently? How can I become the person that I need to be, that different version of myself that can think differently? Because that's usually all that requires any kind of a change in us, is our thoughts. Because a thought of any sort produces a result, a tangible result on some level. Some kind of physical concreteness to that thought. So there's no such thing as a thought that doesn't matter or a neutral thought. They all produce substance on some level. So our thinking, when it can be changed, changes everything. And as long as we keep showing up as a person who thinks and acts in the same way, or approaches things through old eyes, or a dull, old perspective, we keep getting the same results over and over again. So the real ask, the real manifestation, the real prayer is to be able to experience things differently, to be able to think differently. And that is what helps us to elevate our consciousness and to get results on next level in life and business. Okay, so back to Mark. All of this is related, you can see. So I'm kind of drawing these different through lines of what's happening both at the retreat and after the retreat, and how it's all kind of happening at once anyway in these parallel universes, because we're the creator of time, right? So this is getting a little quantum. So Mark was amazing. And, he was inviting us to bring forward our questions and our issues with this that we face. And beautiful things happened there. And that, man, you know, there's so many things that I want to tell you guys, and I just don't feel like they're mine to tell. It's kind of goes back to that whole, like, the video wasn't rolling. Yes, there's some still pictures. Yes, we all have our stories about it, and they're powerful. They're powerful, but they don't totally feel like mine to share. And, the things that were transformed there were just so deep and vulnerable. And I am going to share them. Just know that if it feels like I'm holding back, I am, because it just doesn't feel like it's completely mine to share outside of that container. But there are so many ways that all of us were discovering the codependent dynamics in our work, in our families, things from past romantic relationships that perhaps we were trying to solve in our work, looking for redemption, looking to try to right wrongs of the past. And it was so beautiful, like we all have so many of the same feelings about ourselves, and this feeling of our imperfection that is such a freaking lie. And it was beautiful to see everyone just being so vulnerable. And Mark did a gorgeous job of, with one of the gentlemen that was there who talked about, in his coaching, feeling like, in previous times in his life that he had done a lot to harm the feminine in relationships. And now he actually coaches women, and feeling like it was a seeking of redemption. And Mark walked him through this beautiful exercise, and had all of the women that were there, because it was about half men and half women at the retreat, come up and stand in front of him while he really just kind of went through the emotions, the feelings, and the fears that he had around women, around his past, around so much that was still subconsciously directing his life and his coaching and so much else. And the fear of being seen. And we all stood up there just looking at him, just sending him love. And I know I had tears streaming down my face. And, he was expressing shame and all sorts of other things from what he had been through. And the feeling that he had caused so much pain. And it was beautiful because Mark would say something like, what I'm most ashamed of is, and then he would answer it. And, what you'd most like to say if you could speak to those people is, and he would complete it, all while making eye contact with all of us women standing in front of him, and just receiving that acceptance and that love and everything else in that moment was so powerful for all of us. It comes back to that whole like law of one, like what is in one is in everyone. And even though I know that some of us women felt like we were seen and heard from all those times that people had treated us that way, to see a man standing up there and admitting that that's not how he had wanted to show up, and also understanding why he did, and feeling that sadness and that true desire for forgiveness in him. I think that transformed all of us who have been through things like that, in just knowing that exists. And the fear of change and everything else, all of it was just coming up all in the moment. And one of the questions that Mark asked him when he was in front of us was, what can I let go of as I look at these women? And he was like, fear, shame. Now I can do that by focusing on the things that are not the fear or the fear of the change. And this one particular guy had so many powerful moments through the weekend, but that was just the beginning. And it was so beautiful to see the way that he opened up and changed right before our eyes. And that particular little mini session within the time with Mark culminated in us all just giving him the biggest hug and just all crying together. And it was so beautiful. And yeah, I will not forget that. And that, thank goodness, is one of the things that the photographer did capture. And I'm really grateful to have that picture, because there was as much healing happening in me as was happening in him in that moment. And I was really grateful to receive that. Hey, just gonna have an ADHD moment and interrupt myself. Did you know that I have an entire community on a platform called School, that's with a K, Skool, where I give free coaching every week? I know a lot of people don't know that, but it is a crazy opportunity to receive subconscious mind rewiring, nervous system regulation, and tens of thousands of dollars worth of other resources absolutely free. And it's just this kind of community that I joined almost 2 years ago that led me to the retreat that I'm talking about on this podcast. So just having a full circle moment to say that since then, I've started my own school. I have my own community. There's fabulous resources in there for you. If you enjoy listening to these podcasts, you're going to love being in that community, and you're going to receive so much from it. And it's a community for people that want to take aligned action. It's not a community for people that just want to suck up information and have it living above the neck. It's for people who want to embody what they're learning, put it to use, and actually show up differently in their lives. So if that sounds like something that interests you, I would love to welcome you to the Becoming More Me community on School. You can find a link in the show notes or wherever you're listening to this. And I can't wait to welcome you there. Now, back to the show. So, Mark's time with us lasted several hours. There was a lot of Q&A and a lot of really transformative stuff happening. Because there was a lot of people there that were going through some things. We sometimes forget that typically healers and people with great gifts have also been through some pretty big challenges in their lives. And having a place where we were allowed to bring it all to the table and get some really high level help for ourselves really just felt amazing. We all know that we're human and that we also need coaches and therapists and people to work with ourselves, but we don't always get it. And I think we all really just got exactly what we needed out of each of the segments during the weekend. And it was amazing, facing abandonment issues and failed relationships and finding the gifts and things that just seem so hard through these gentle reframes and new eyes was just, it was everything. And I felt, and I feel it now, for so much of the weekend, like I just had no words to explain the feelings and the transformation that was happening in me. We had several times when we kind of went around in circle fashion, sharing things, what the weekend meant to us, or, contributing during these different talks. And while I know I have the capability to be eloquent and express myself quite well, it was not with me all weekend. And I felt like it was particularly not with me on Saturday afternoon when we were having an experience with Dr. Divi that I'll tell you about in a minute. But on Friday, I had gotten a message from my husband, and he mentioned how the Northern Lights were going to be visible where I was, and sent me the information and everything else. And it was interesting because all of us were really just not on our phones or using technology while we were there. Every now and then we'd pick it up, but like I said, we weren't really taking video or pictures or working. We were just together. So I got this message from my husband, and I told everybody, and nobody really had heard about it or knew. So I was glad that he had helped us to know that that was going to be visible for us. And Friday night, we got to see them, and they were gorgeous. And I was so glad to be there with people who have experienced them before, because I would not have known how to see them, if that makes sense. And for those of you who have seen them, you probably understand the whole like using the extended exposure on your phone to take pictures of them and actually capture the colors and things. Some of the light in the colors was visible to the naked eye looking in the sky, but the full range was only able to be captured by taking a picture in a certain way of the sky where they were. So you could kind of tell where they were. It almost looked like funky clouds in the sky. And then when you take the picture, all the colors were there. So I was grateful, because otherwise I would have been looking at the sky going, so this is it? Like, it just wouldn't have seemed nearly as impressive as what you could see through the camera lens instead. So for anybody who has never seen them or who is trying to see them because you've also seen something like what my husband said, saying they might be visible for you, just know the pictures are going to show you a lot more than your eye will. And you need to do that like extended the long exposure time where you're getting like 10 seconds worth of exposure, and then take a look at that and see what you get. We, between the group of us, got amazing pictures. And I was just, it's so crazy to think of what's happening up there that you can't see with the naked eye, but that is totally right there. And that was such a gift. Like, it was total icing on an already perfect, delicious cake, which was the weekend. But to get to experience that, wow. And it was really only one night that they were great. And we all made some time and stayed up later than maybe we wanted to in order to experience. I know for me, I was so tired, so ready to go to bed, but I hung in there. I learned how to take the pictures, learned how to see them, and just went to bed in total awe of what is happening out there in the night sky. It just blew me away. Okay, so I'm realizing without much surprise that this is more of a 3 or maybe 4-part series than a 2-part series. So I want to wrap this up here and continue next week so that I can share the fullness of Saturday and Sunday from the retreat, as well as what happened in the weeks after. Because I'm sitting here a full month later, still integrating, still processing, still receiving downloads, and still benefiting from everything that happened during that long weekend. So I don't want to rush through or, cut it short, because I already can't convey the absolute fullness of the experience. I can't recreate it for you. It's not intended to be recreated for you. And there's so much that I have to gloss over anyway, just for privacy, anonymity, that sort of thing. But I want to make sure I can share what I am capable of sharing with you in the best way possible. So we are going to pick this up next episode and go a little bit deeper. And it might not be the next episode. Just look, there'll be, the parts will be labeled. If for some reason there's a guest episode in between, that might be the case. But we're going to continue on with this in the coming weeks. And this is important because when you have something like this, something where you're going to be learning and growing, whether you are taking a course, attending a retreat, delivering a retreat, going through, therapy, counseling, any of those sort of things where you're intentionally choosing change and transformation, you get to prepare leading up to it, you get to receive it without attachment to the outcome, and who knows what it is that's actually going to be received, and then you get to integrate it. That's the importance of what I'm sharing here. And I know how intelligent you are, that you can connect the dots to things that you've been through. And you can also get some fun travel tips and, different things from the actual experience of the retreat that I attended. But there's a bigger picture here about the way that we the way that we connect, the way that we do business, the way that we grow, the way that we transform and love, and the way that we show up in this world, as well as what the real truth is, the capital T truth of who we are and our absolute power to accomplish and achieve such amazing things because of the light within us. And that's really what I'm trying to convey by sharing this. It's not really that I think it's the absolute most interesting thing in the world, but that our power to change, our power to transform, our power to do just amazingly brilliant things is right there. And it's through experiences like this that we consciously seek and open our mind, or maybe even create a whole new mind to receive, that these things get to happen, that our reality gets to shift and change, that our paradigms get to shift and change. This is the essence of the work I do with my clients. And I reveled in being able to receive a different version of that through this retreat. So that is really what I'm hoping to convey in these episodes. And oh man, it'll come up in the next one, but I have this fear of not being seen or understood right here. And that's exactly what I brought to the table when we were working with Dr. Divi on Saturday. And yeah, I manifested something really interesting there, and I will share that in the next episode. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate when you all tune in to the Becoming More Me podcast, and I'm so grateful for what you've helped this to become over the last 3 years that we've been publishing weekly episodes. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.